So again, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. We are happy to welcome you on this third Spark of the year. We have the pleasure to invite our French member on the topic on deforestation. It's, I would say, maybe for some an unusual topic, but I see that some of you have connected today, maybe related to your function, to your exploration inside your organization, or as a topic that you find that is important to also bring forward in your organization. So I would like to welcome Cécile Merme to this park as responsible of working inside the sustainability group within BPCE, which is the second largest group of cooperative banks in France. As we were discussing, Cécile and I, we believe that deforestation can be an important topic as it's part of the development and the preservation of the territory, one of the core missions of cooperative banks to keep protecting, developing, and sustaining the local economy, its population, and of course, its well-being. So with these words, I would like to welcome Cécile. Cécile, thank you very much again for being with us and for preparing this very interesting spark on deforestation, and especially in years of sustainability and the year of international cooperatives. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Valeria. Hello, everyone. We are happy to be here with you. So I don't know exactly which countries are represented. It would be nice if you can just type it in the conversation, and maybe just also say if deforestation is already a topic that is covered by your bank. That will be of interest also for us. So really happy to be here with you. So it's an opportunity for us to share. That's nice. To share works which are ongoing, Germany High, in at the group BPCE. So maybe it's not usual for the Spark session. We will not share something that is already achieved or published, but it's really a reflection that we have on the topic. And today I'm really happy. I will be also with Grant Rudgley. So Grant belongs to the to the biodiversity consultancy, and we were very lucky to have their insights, which were valuable for works on deforestation. Maybe Grant, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Cécile. Hello, everyone. Bonjour to those in Brazil. Hi, everybody. So great to be with you. Thank you, Cécile, for the invitation. The Biodiversity Consultancy is based in Cambridge in the UK. We have been around for more than 15 years, and our mission is to leverage all of the conservation and ecology expertise in Cambridge to support the private sector to do less bad and do more good for nature. And we have been behind many of the leading standards and metrics for this over the years, including the IFC's biodiversity standards, and most recently parts of the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosure guidance. So thank you, Cécile, and everyone for welcoming today.
Yes. So today, okay, I'm looking for, yes, what will be also nice, we have a short agenda for the session, but we really welcome your questions anytime. We want a live and a lively session, so please do not hesitate to raise a hand or ask questions in the conversation. Will be welcome. So maybe I'll start with just let me the agenda for today, just to introducing group BPC for those who do not know the group. So we are a cooperative a group, as you can see. we have cooperative shareholders owning two networks, so Banque Populaire on one side and Caisse d'Épargne on the other. The two networks, they, at their level, own each 50% of BPCE, and BPCE really serves as the central body. And BPCE then owns diverse subsidiaries, such as Natixis, Corporate Investment Banking, or Natixis Investment Managers. So this is the global structure of the group. What you can notice, we are the purple one as a result of the Banque Populaire network, which is blue, and the Caisse d'Épargne network, which is red. Then, in a few words, just trying to have you at the same time. The group, it's the second largest group in France. It's a banking model which is universal, so serving our 35 million customers worldwide, with 100,000 employees around the world, and we are present in over 50 countries, with a focus in France for the two major networks. So just for give you an idea, and maybe let's go directly on deforestation. So the group, just to make the link, the group has launched its is opening a new page in its history. It has launched its Vision 2030 strategic plan, aiming at diversifying its revenues and activities with three circles of growth. It's both in France, mostly on the retail part, in Europe, and worldwide. And worldwide, we aim at becoming one of the major players in accompanying companies and progressing in a more sustainable practices. So when we talk about sustainable practices, we usually think of climate, but there's another topic which is also very important, which is biodiversity. So I don't know if you're familiar with this topic. In 2019, there was a group, the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, who highlighted in a report the rapid loss of biodiversity. And how they define biodiversity, it's all the living components of nature, which are ecosystems, species, and also genetic diversity between the species. And the biodiversity, so this living components of nature, is really facing a huge decline. And the IPBES showed us the different drivers, of 5 main drivers of the biodiversity loss. Why it was the loss very dramatic? It's because of its rapidity. The extinction is going too fast for the nature to adapt. So it's a very this fall may have also consequences on the ecosystem services. So I'm using terms I don't know if you're familiar with, but ecosystem services are services provided by nature, like pollination or like water filtration. These are services rendered at no cost by nature, and as nature is in decline and the biodiversity is in decline, this may have effects to the services that are rendered. And so to come back on the on the drivers of the biodiversity loss. When I joined the sustainability office within BPCE, one of my mission was to really understand what biodiversity means also for a banking system, for a banking institution. And we really rely on the scientific outcomes. So we looked at the drivers of biodiversity loss. One of the first driver stated in the report is the change of land or sea use. So that means like habitats going over nature, like deforestation also, so change of use of land from forest to agricultural use, for example. That's also many looking for the terms I'd say in French, so sorry, I have to know the term in English. Imperméabilisation, so sorry, of soil.
Check.
Ouais, imperméabilisation. Or just when you have cities, let's say cities expanding over nature, and this change the use of the soil. This one, it was identified as one of the main driver of biodiversity change, followed by direct exploitation, but we should say rather over exploitation of resources, like something you can have in mind, like overfishing, leading to a drastic loss of, for example, some fish stocks. For example, I think the cod, the Atlantic cod, was one of the rapidly declining fishing stocks. And then you have climate change having a negative effect on biodiversity at the same level as pollution. So it can be any kind of pollution. It can be plastic pollution. It can be physical pollution, which all lead to, yes, waterproofing. Thank you. We can lead to the loss of biodiversity. And at last, we have the invasive alien species, which usually take over native species. So all these factors, all these drivers have a very negative impact on biodiversity. And one of the topics which was at the heart of both climate and biodiversity and nature was deforestation. Deforestation, as forest is usually considered, not all of them, but most of them considered as carbon sink, and also home to a very diverse biodiversity in plants and animals. But the loss of forests is an issue both for climate and for nature. That's why it naturally comes at the agenda of the bank, as the bank is already committed to acting for a low carbon economy. The topic really came quite naturally on the agenda. That's why that's where we worked together with a biodiversity consultancy to better understand what we can do on the topic, and how we can really tackle it from a banking perspective. And maybe, I don't know if you have this in mind, but last thing is there's a specific momentum in Europe, maybe you've heard of it, with the European deforestation-free regulation. This was adopted, the regulation was adopted like 2 years ago, and in 2023, expected to come into force end of last year, was postponed by a year, and really it prohibits the placing commodities on the EU market without having proved that they are not linked to deforestation. And the commodities, there are 7 of them, like palm oil, soy, coffee, cattle, caoutchouc, rubber, and timber. And all byproducts are also considered. This is a very important regulation. It applies to corporate, so it does not apply to financial institutions, but so clients will have to comply with this regulation by the end of the year if they want to place products on the EU market. That's a very important regulation to have in mind, and I think it raises also many questions, as it is a very ambitious regulation. One of the questions that was risen was, for example, will it prohibit smallholder farmers from accessing, in a way, the EU market? Will it exclude smallholder farmers? As the regulation requires the exact localization of the commodity. So it really requires a full setup. It requires to rethink the whole supply chain, and it is not without consequences. So there are many questions still open around this regulation, and by June, so in two months' time, there should be the publication of the country of risk from an EU perspective. So these are very important and accurate topic at the moment. So it gives us also a momentum to re-tackle the topic from our side. I don't know if you have any question at this time, but maybe just to, if not, we go to deforestation. So once you've said that it's a topic that is linked to nature, biodiversity, and climate, once you had the momentum, so to readdress it, then you can ask what are the levers for the bank to address it. So if you take the EU regulation perspective, then you will look at the commodities which are identified as linked to deforestation. And next question will be, and I think it will be the question for all the banks who want to tackle sustainability topics. So what is my exposure to deforestation? It's mostly indirect through the clients that we finance. So what is their position in the value chain? Which are the commodities involved? In which geographies our clients do operate? And which are the financial products that are linked, that are linking the bank to the client? Is it a long relationship? Is it just ad hoc financing? And then, depending on this assessment, you will try to identify where you can have really levers that you can pull to really achieve an ambition that the bank will set on deforestation, and really participating in holding deforestation. So this is an example of the works we went through to identify how we are exposed, where in the value chain, how big is our exposure, to really then go to the next steps and set a strategy. So we are talking about deforestation, but maybe Grant, I didn't really explain what deforestation is or how we can define it. I'll let you the floor.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cécile. And please do feel free to jump in at any point, anybody. Very happy to answer questions. So yes, as Cécile was saying, we've arrived at this need to prioritize deforestation because it is the biggest driver of land use change, and land use change is the biggest driver of nature loss, of biodiversity loss, the biggest cause of the decline of ecosystem services that we rely upon, and also because there is no net zero without halting and reversing deforestation. So with all of that in mind, what do we mean by deforestation? So what you have visualized here is the commonly accepted definition of deforestation, and it is the definition that is being used by the EUDR regulation that Cécile mentioned. And it's the definition from the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, and something also called the Accountability Framework Initiative. So anything to do with deforestation, the Accountability Framework Initiative is where to go in terms of definitions. So what are the components of the definition? So first of all, you've got the size of an area that's being deforested, you've got the height of the trees being deforested, and you've got the coverage of those trees. So when it comes to coverage, think about that in terms of how much you could thin out a forest. So if the forest was what we call a virgin forest, a primary forest, you can imagine that it's going to be really dense. There's going to be loads and loads of trees in there. So to what extent could you remove some and it not count as deforestation? So this is the third component. So you see these along the top here. You see the size of an area. So it's anything of 0.5 hectares or greater. The height of the trees, anything greater than 5 meters and above. And the coverage, if you're thinning out the area by anything greater than 10%. So that is the definition of deforestation. But the thing is, you can kind of see here that, particularly with this idea of coverage, we're not actually converting an entire habitat. You know, we're not changing that pristine forested area into an area where there is just cattle and no trees. We've just thinned it out. So what we've done is we've degraded the forest. So it's really important to acknowledge that there are two components to deforestation. There's the conversion of a habitat. You can completely convert the area, or you could degrade the forest, and both count because both are ultimately contributing to that driver of biodiversity loss, that driver of climate change, which is the conversion of the land from its current state. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, Cécile, if I may. So Cécile's mentioned some of the context already, which is that nature is in decline, rapidly in decline. We don't have the charts here, but I'm sure lots of you are familiar with the concept of Earth overshoot day and planetary boundaries, and in essence, just the concept that we are living far beyond the capacity of the planet to provide what we need, and that eventually and increasingly there are consequences to that behavior. And the effort on biodiversity, and some of you may have heard it, that is equivalent to the Paris Agreement for Climate was the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, signed at the end of 2022. And that's really the Paris equivalent for nature. One of the key targets from the Global Biodiversity Framework is that by 2030, we are protecting 30% of the Earth's land. And this target sums up, and within it has this need to make sure that we are protecting existing habitats, existing forests from further deforestation. But of course, there are nuances to it, and there are nuances in the agreement. And this is what you see on the left-hand side with this water flow chart. Because ultimately what we're trying to do, and what all of the targets of the GBF are trying to do, is to move us towards a situation where nature is being degraded, to a situation where we are nature positive. So nature positive might sound super, super ambitious, but actually the baseline for nature positive, and indeed the baseline for the EU's deforestation regulation, is 2020. So all that it means is that we need to be allowing nature to regenerate, as it does naturally by itself, at a rate greater than we are degrading it, and that because nature is already extremely degraded in 2020, there is huge opportunity for it to regenerate. So we're regenerating from a very low baseline, particularly in places like Europe, where the UK is one of the most nature degraded countries in the world. So this water flow chart is just trying to then relate that to the sorts of commitments that your clients might be making. So they might have some sort of commitment to no net loss or to net positive, or they might start, particularly the leading companies, leading corporates are thinking about this, about how can they contribute to nature positive. And really all of these no net loss, net positive, they are about, first of all, avoiding the harm to nature. So wherever we can avoid polluting, wherever we can avoid using the resource, doing that. And then second of all, reducing. So reducing the amount of fertilizer, reducing the amount of conversion wherever possible. And then last of all, compensating or transforming, doing things that help support the system to transform and therefore contribute to nature positive. The deforestation and conversion 3, thank you for that question in the chat. So GBF is the Global Biodiversity Framework. So the role that the concept of deforestation and conversion free, and I appreciate that concept hasn't been defined in a prior slide, but it is the concept in the EU's deforestation regulations. It's about being deforestation and conversion free, that you are sourcing your soft commodities, that you are producing your commodities, that you are producing them in a way that is free of deforestation and conversion against a 2020 baseline. So that obviously contributes towards nature positive by avoiding conversion and reducing degradation. So this is what goes into this concept of DCF. And so if you were looking at a major soft commodity trader or a major consumer goods, so a soft commodity trader like Bunge or Louis Dreyfus or Cargill, or you were looking at a consumer goods company like Nestle or Unilever, you will see them saying that they are committed to DCF, or they're committed to being deforestation free by a certain date. And so this is the kind of the key concept. And so just last point before I move to the next slide, when it comes to forests, we are a lot more mature and advanced when it comes to deforestation than we are in terms of the other pressures, the other damage that's being done to nature. So people have been trying to prevent deforestation, to protect forests for many decades, including corporates. I led a partnership between banks and corporates called the Soft Commodities Compact, which was a compact between corporates like Nestle and banks like BNP Paribas for more than 10 years. There's been a lot of effort to try and solve this problem. And during those efforts, there were the use of targets like net zero deforestation or zero net deforestation. We've tended to move away from that because it it creates perverse incentives. So the idea of having no net loss for forests is problematic. And instead, the efforts today from groups like the Consumer Goods Forum, which is a group of major corporates that are very connected to usually agricultural value chains, they commit to forest positive, not to zero net deforestation. So we're very much in this territory of not just avoiding deforestation and conversion wherever possible, but also trying to drive regeneration and make that possible through the protection of habitats.
I see we have 2 questions in the chat. Maybe one more from you, if you want. Is Sophie asking if we can give an example of compensating?
Sure. So the classic example of compensating is the credits example. The most common type of nature-based carbon credit is forest-based carbon credits. And I think regardless of your background, I'm sure you're aware that there can be a lot of challenges with getting those credits done in a way that's robust and in a way that actually benefits the places where reforestation happens. For example, to make it very real for you, eucalyptus trees are very effective carbon sequesters. So they are really effective at sucking in carbon and growing very quickly, but they are an invasive species in most places, and they take over. And so you always need to be very careful about your planning. So can be very complex. We at the Biodiversity Consultancy, because there are now and has been a lot of talk about biodiversity credits, which are compensating for more complex degradation of nature. In short, and we've been a part of most of the definition and consortium on that topic. Our view in very short is that you need to be using those credits in as equivalent a way as possible. So if you are a mining company operating in West Africa and you deforest an area and you degrade some of the habitat, that when you are finished mining the area and you look to turn it back to its former state, that you are doing that in the local area. And if you're looking to compensate in the short term, that you do it in the same landscape, in the same biome. So you do it in as equivalent a way as possible.
Thanks. And the other question from Fatima: how does a cooperative bank balance short-term goals with the long-term sustainability challenges posed by deforestation, especially when assessing loans to industries with indirect links to land use chain?
Of course. I mean, Cécile, I'm sure you have your view as well. It's certainly a daily challenge, I'm sure. And it's a challenge for all of our clients. The answer to this question is that considering where deforestation and conversion happens is smart business practice for your clients, both in terms of the resilience of the supply chain and in terms of the resilience to regulation and to any consumer preference shifts. So those are types of physical risk. So when you degrade land, deforest land, degrade land, you decrease its resilience very quickly to any sort of hazard. And I think the classic example here, there's a few people here from Brazil that will know this very well. When you deforest, say in the Amazon for cattle, the land becomes unproductive extremely quickly. It washes away, and this is something that is true of most situations. So you increase the resilience of your supply chain by sourcing from areas that are managed as sustainably as possible, as productively as possible, and just that aren't that are managed in a way that recognizes the importance of the ecosystems around them. And that's, of course, a complex thing to do, but it is recognized by major consumer goods companies and major traders. And one of my biggest concerns as an individual is that the major corporates and the major traders are making their supply chains more resilient globally. But there is a lot of risk in regional wholesale markets amongst SME producers, SME wholesale traders that are not able to take the same approach, and that's a big problem. So there's a risk. There's a risk and a resilience answer to this question that it is beholden on us as a community to make to business lines, but it's of course a long journey.
Yes. Yes, actually, I mean, the bank is also looking for not only short-term profitability, but also a sustainable profitability. And that's why we open topics such as deforestation to see if there's an issue with our clients and if we can accompany them in their sustainable journey, like making efforts to retrace the supply chain. And then the bank can have different options, either to saying making exclusion, doesn't want to focusing maybe, let's say in France, only on importers on the EU markets, assuming that with the EUDR regulation, everything that will come into the EU market will be sustainable. But it's not really I think the strategy of the bank, who wants to have a positive impact. And having a positive impact is not only having a positive impact at its own frontier, but also working together with stakeholders and clients to know if they've identified risks and if they're moving towards actions that can lead to reduce deforestation. So I'd say it's both risk and opportunity also to have the discussion with the client. And I think it can be really part of the strategy of the client, not just of the bank, not just assessing if it's compliant with a few rules, but really having a strategic ESG dialogue and identifying the very specific levels that maybe we can work upon. I'd say this for my point of view. Maybe go to the next slide, which is having the global scope, the global picture with the nature positive global biodiversity framework. Maybe going back to something very concrete on what is traceability and what does it mean in practice for our clients or the clients of the banks around this call.
Yeah, sure. So shall I pick back up, Cécile?
Yes.
Sure. Perfect. So there's a lot on this slide, everybody. So I am aware of that, but as Cécile said, this is about, like, we've mentioned a couple of times the deforestation and conversion free label, making this claim that the commodities that we're sourcing are DCF, that the commodities we're producing are DCF. And so, well, how do you make that claim? Like, what are the components of DCF? Because ultimately it's the goal that we're looking for here. So how do we know that we're reaching that goal? Because of course, if we can't measure it, we can't manage it, we can't manage the risk, we can't make sure that we've got resilience. So DCF, it has 5 components, and as I go through the components, I'll end up being able to talk about what you see on the slide, which is how to make a DCF claim. So the first 2 components of DCF are the cutoff date and the target date related to where the commodity is coming from. So cutoff date is about saying that this area can't have been deforested after a certain point in time. So for EUDR, that's the end of 2020. So that's a cutoff date. And then the target date is when are you targeting as a company to be to be DCF, or for the area that you produce from to be DCF. So that's the target date, and typically that will be 2025 would be best practice there, but of course it is 2025. So we are, very aware of that. So those are the first 2 components. Then what you see here, the next 2 components are risk assessment and traceability, and they go hand in hand. So Cécile mentioned that in July, the EU will make a decision on what countries are high risk and not high risk when it comes to deforestation. This is a very politically difficult thing for the EU to do because it has a lot of consequence. So for example, Brazil would be high risk, but will Argentina be high risk? And that has a lot of consequences for Brazil and a lot of consequences diplomatically. But that is the first. We do risk assessment for countries to begin with and for commodities. So you have those 7 high risk commodities that Cécile mentioned, and then you have the combination with the country. So for example, soy coming from the US isn't high risk for deforestation, but almost certainly soy coming from Brazil will be defined as high risk for deforestation. So that risk assessment then leads you to know that you need traceability below the country level, because it can't just be labeled as, oh, this is Brazilian soy and therefore it's okay. It's like, no, we need to actually know where in Brazil the soy came from. So then you start going down this chain of custody, which is what you see on this slide. So the chain of custody is there are a number of ways that you could do it, but at the moment, within a country like Brazil, the only real defensible way of doing the chain of custody is going back to the farm level. And this is because, beginning with the left-hand side, if you have, let's say that what you're buying, just hypothetically, what you were buying, your soy that you were buying at the port, came ultimately from 100 farmers on a mass balance approach. Only one of those 100 farmers actually had deforested or converted since 2020, and so the whole volume, as you see in the bottom left of the slide, is contaminated. And so the issue that we have right now is that the mass balance approaches are not working at the port level because there isn't a segregated chain of custody in place for them. The ways the segregated chain of custody could work is that you either have it right back to the farm level and you remove that one farm, or, so that's the second column. The third column is that you remove the region that you know to be higher risk. So for instance, you could just say that everything coming from Pará state is high risk. And so we're not taking anything from there. And so you just go back to that state level. Of course, that's problematic, but that's another way of doing it. And then last of all, you could just have traceability to all farms and know that and know what's happening. That's the far right-hand column. So this is, as you can see, quite a high bar once you get below that country level for people to try and meet. Now, those of you on the call, most of your balance sheet might be small businesses that produce food or that import soft commodities from larger traders and so on and so on. So those clients, they're relying on the big trading houses, or they're relying on the exporters. They're relying on what they are saying about these commodities. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So what it means for you as a bank is that, you want to be supporting your clients to source from those that are making good claims, robust claims, and therefore helping your clients to be able to interpret them. And so that's potentially one way that you can help. Equally, if you do happen to in some way bank those larger traders, or if you are based in Brazil and you're banking wholesale traders or sources or producers, the relevance is of course there. So these are the components 3 and 4. I said there was 5 components. The 5th component is monitoring. So no, you don't just do this in year 1 and then assume that everything's fine based on the level of risk. You will do it in year 2, or depending if the risk is very high, you might do it more frequently than that. That's more debatable, but there's always a monitoring component. And this is what's really positive, is that the remote sensing with satellites and the digitalization of information about commodities, including by how the Brazilian government and state governments have things reported. As an example, it's improving. So the data is getting better. It's getting more accessible. So it's getting easier to monitor. But we have a little way to go. So I think I'm going to leave it there. The one thing that I will say, just to drive home this point about why this matters to your institutions and to your clients, the last year or so, if you look at but if you look at most of those high risk commodities that Cécile mentioned, you will see that the prices of them have gone completely crazy. And this is a combination of the transition risk of EUDR and of the impact of La Nina, which is, of course, a normal weather pattern. But the reason why the La Nina has an impact that is spread differently in different places is because of how people are managing their land. And so it comes back to the supply chain resilience part. If you're sourcing from an area that's more resilient, it's therefore benefiting your business. So those people that have really good supply chain visibility, that really understand where their commodities are coming from, have been protected from this transition risk of EUDR and the physical risks associated with La Nina. And it's had a very big impact on profitability and the value of these companies. And I will leave it there for Q&A, Cécile.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Grant. Thank you everyone for your attention. There were some questions in the chat, but please do not hesitate if you have any questions. It's really the opportunity to exchange on this topic. Well, I will assume it was very clear. Anyway, it's a very large topic, so we cannot really cover it in a call. But I think with Grant, we were able to give you some insights on why deforestation is important, or why is it tackled by a bank, and how to address it. And just for you also to have in mind the EUDR regulation and the high prices. So we shall expect cocoa and coffee really to be more expensive in the coming months and years, especially in the EU. And this regulation may be last not only for products imported in the EU, it will be also any products placed on the EU. So it also concerns French producers. So like cattle in France, needs also to be grown by soil, which is proven not to be deforested. So it has really huge consequences. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Grant. No
My pleasure.
question?
Yes, thank you very much to both of you to animate this spark. I would have a last question. How do you foresee the future, actually? Do you think that this is a topic that banks, all the banks and all the sectors should keep in mind? And does it has an impact on advising also your clients who develop the local economy on transform their business? What would be the role of a bank? Today you are raising the awareness. What will be the role of tomorrow?
A huge question. Yeah, thank you so much, Valeria. I mean, I'll give Cécile the last word. In the short term, if you're a European-based bank, it's going to be very difficult to not have an approach to deforestation, because you'll need to make sure that your clients are complying with EUDR. So that's going to be important and tricky. So that will require some capacity on the compliance side, just thinking very practically. I know that's not very exciting, but then on the other hand, I would just refer to my kind of above answers, that the more that there are risks and resilience benefits of understanding supply chains like this and understanding where the commodities are coming from, that are very relevant to identifying how to support clients, how to price products for clients, and the appetite of the bank to do certain things.
Yeah. We'll definitely join Grant on this conclusion. Deforestation will be on the agenda. It will be on the agenda of the next COP in Belém, in Brazil. So it's very an important topic, not from just a nature side, but so climate side. It's an important topic for clients. So the best way is to try really to understand it, put it at the agenda, understand the supply chain of the client, question him about whether he really has control or traceability over its supply chain, and how we can improve the traceability towards more sustainable practices, as we want to be more sustainable tomorrow for the global resilience of the economy and the ecosystems at large. So it will be definitely a topic on the agenda, not easy to tackle, but very worth it, very worth it. And I think, yes, companies are moving. So I think it's a good time also to address the topic. It's one among the others, but it's an important one to not be left aside.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this, for your answer and giving some perspective. So again, also to everyone participating to this Spark of this month, thank you very much for attending. As you know, we'll be sharing the presentation. You can ask further questions to Cécile, who can help you also to reflect on how your own financial cooperative organization can approach this topic in your country. So again, thank you very much to our French member to be with us today, and hope to see you on another occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.